All right, how's everybody doing? My name is Antoine Demps, and we're going over learning objectives for Chapter 11. The learning objectives that we have are number one, understand the various purposes grades are served, such as sorting, motivating, and communicating. Number two, describe how grades should be communicated. Should communicate student achievement, specifically what students know and can do, rather than mixing in non-achievement factors. Number three, the steps for summarizing assessment information to determine a final grade, including using the most current information, verifying accuracy, converting to a common scale, weighing, and combining data. Number four, how to understand extra achievement factors such as aptitude, effort, and compliance, impacting grades and how they should often be reported separately rather than embedded in academic grades. Number five, recognize the importance of linking final grades back to specific learning targets and ensuring students are informed in advance of grading procedures and criteria. So number one, understanding the various purposes grades serve, such as sorting, motivation, or communicating. So what I got out of that was that grades should be viewed first and foremost as tools for communicating a student's level of academic achievement, not just as instruments for ranking or motivating behavior. The chapter does highlight how using grades to sort students or control actions can lead to unintended misrepresentation and also confusion about what a grade truly means. So teachers, we often unintentionally blend factors like effort, compliance, or prior ability into grades, which undermines their reliability. So instead, grades must be based purely on mastery of content standards. Other student traits should be clearly defined and reported separately. Communicating achievement clearly using grades helps all stakeholders. So it keeps everybody involved, which is the students, parents, and even the school. Understanding progress and making fair decisions, while formative assessments and specific feedback should be used to support motivation and growth. This approach ensures that grades are accurate, consistent, and meaningful and reflecting to real life learning.
All right, good evening. My name is Ryan Allen, and I had objective number 2. So one of the central arguments in chapter 11 is that grades must, well, first of all, let me back up. So objective number 2 is describing how grades should communicate student achievement, specifically what students know and can do rather than mixing in non-achievement factors. So one of the central arguments in chapter 11 is that grades must accurately reflect student achievement, meaning they should communicate only what students know and can do in relation to clearly define the learning targets. The book emphasizes that grades become misleading and ultimately lose their value when they are blended with non-achievement factors such as like effort and participation, behavior, punctuality, or homework completion. They explain that the purpose of the grade, especially for a report card, is to provide a summary statement about academic performance at specific moments in time. So to fulfill that purpose, grades need to be anchored in solid evidence, achievement collected through high quality assessments. When outside factors are mixed into this summary, the grade no longer tells the true story of the student's learning. So for example, a student may have like a strong understanding of the content, but struggle with the organization part of turning in their assignments on time. So if those behaviors lower the final grade, parents and other educators receive a distorted picture of the students, their academic mastery. So in contrast, another student might exhibit strong work habits, but have a weak conceptual understanding. So a high grade in that scenario misrepresents the student's actual achievement. The book also argues that this mixing of achievement and behavior violates the principles of fairness and accuracy. So a grade should function like a clear signal, not a muddy blend of unrelated factors. So when a grade mixes academic learning with behavior, it becomes impossible to determine what the student actually knows. Let's see, go through my notes here. This undermines the usefulness of grades for instructional planning, college and career readiness, and meaningful conversations between teachers, students, and their families. So to ensure the clarity, the book advocates for separating achievement evidence from behavior or working habits, especially when the schools report to the parents. So many schools now use dual report systems with one section for academic proficiency and another for habits such as responsibility, participation, and collaboration. This structure allows the teachers to highlight the important behaviors of their students without corrupting the academic record. The chapter also emphasizes transparency, so students must know in advance what counts as evidence of achievement and what does not. When teachers are making learning targets explicit and explain how grades are determined, students can focus their efforts towards mastering essential content and skills rather than simply just collecting points or avoiding penalties for their grades. Another major point for this objective is that achievement grades should be based on the most recent and the most representative evidence. So not just the averages that include early attempts. Early struggles are a part of learning. Grading them equally with later mastery unfairly penalizes students who ultimately meet the target. So academic grades should reflect the student's current level of mastery, not their learning journey or the compliance along the way of that journey. So overall, this objective insists that grades must be valid, that they must be fair and meaningful representations of academic achievement. They must clearly communicate how well students meet specific learning targets, free from unrelated influences. So when grades focus solely on achievement, they become more accurate, they become more equitable, and they become more helpful for everyone involved, teachers, students, parents, and future educators. And that is all I have for objective 2.
Good afternoon. My name is Jolanda Ware. I had objective 3, explain the steps for summarizing assessment, some information to determine a final grade, including using the most current information, verifying accuracy, converting to a common scale, weighting, or combining data. So what I started with was that summarizing assessment information to determine if a final grade means gathering all relevant performance data. It's important to make sure that it's correct and comparable. Also to apply agreed weights and combine it into one fair, defensible score. So overall, grading is the process of condensing a great deal of information into a single step for the ease of communication. But the summarizing process is critical. It's recommended also that teachers should first decide what information will be used summatively and then what information will be used formatively. So teachers should decide which system they will use to differentiate between the two in their record keeping book. So it did note that there were 4 record keeping guidelines from the previous chapter, specifically chapter 10 and chapter 9 that we just recently worked on. So those 4 record keeping guidelines record formative and summative assessment information, organize entries in the grade book, keep track of information about their work habits and social skills separately from achievement information, and record achievement information by raw score when possible. It should be noted that students' data should always be organized so that you can easily convert them to a common scale, as well as weigh them as desired and combine them to arrive at an overall number. So there are 5 steps involved in the process for summarizing grades. And it's a step-by-step process. So the first step is to always use the most current information. So start with the latest records, such as the most recent quizzes, projects, and if the student did complete a reassessment or made corrections, use that newer result test score instead of using the older one. The second step would be to verify the accuracy. So check for grade data entry errors, missing submissions, or mislabeled items. Cross-check source documents. The third step would be to convert to a common scale. So that means to convert every assessment to like the same scale, such as like a percent out of 100 or a 4.0 scale, or like different types of evidence that are comparable. The fourth step would be to apply agreed weighting. So it means to use the established weighting policy, such as observations are 40% or products are 35%. Ensure weights to 100% or normalize them if not. And then the fifth step would be to combine the data and multiply each converted score by its weight, such as like a decimal, then sum the results to get the final percentage. And I did put a few notes with that. Grading expert Ken O'Connor did note that he reminded us it's not where a student starts on a given learning target that matters at grading time, but where the student finishes. And he noted to let the formative assessments record clearly show progress and growth and include that in the conference and about student achievement, but ultimately let the report card grade communicate about the level of achievement at the end of the grading period. And as you formulate your own grading guidelines as teachers, it's very significant that we keep in mind that the goal of standards-based education are to teach and to assess and to improve, as well as to communicate about student learning in relation to academic learning standards. So even though we are teachers, learning and improving our required formative assessment informations don't always require grading, but the ones that we do choose to grade, we need to make sure that we keep in mind that the first audience for grades is the students themselves and that it's personal and that their learning is not harmed when we adopt unexamined or ill-formed grading practices. And that's all I have.
So I had objective 4, understand how extra achievement factors such as aptitude, effort, or compliance impact grading and why they should often be reported separately rather than embedded in academic grades. It started off by just like explaining that judging your student to be an overachiever in relation to their ability and aptitude or intelligence, and judging another student to be an underachiever, you would assign them different grades. But it talked about like two students, like it would have student X and student Y. If they both did the same project and you saw that one was capable of doing more, then okay, say student X was capable of doing more than student Y, then wouldn't you give them an A? Like, wouldn't you give one an A and then one maybe a B? But then if you go back and look at it really deeply, then you would see that student X, maybe student X did not do their best in performance, or you knew that they could achieve more than what they did, then you would give them a B. And maybe although student Y did the work of a C, you would go back and say, okay, this student tried their best. They put all that they could put in it and then possibly give them a B. So it did discuss that in there. And then it also stated that when the aptitude is factored into the grade, achievement scores are adjusted to reflect the level of performance expected based on a judgment of the individual student's potential. And it said that a student with high effort and compliance may earn a good grade despite low academic proficiency, while an able student with poor work habits may receive a lower grade, masking their true academic potential. And then aptitude is a potential for future learning and is not a measure of current academic growth. So would you include aptitude? It talked about how you would hold out the promise that every student will be judged according to his or her potential. Those are slacking will be motivated to put forth their best effort. So these are reasons why you should do it. It will help like students to put forth their best effort. Struggling students can be rewarded for doing the best that they can if you are judging simply by what they could do. And then it had like other things about why you should not do it. One of the things is that the definition is not clear. So you don't really have a good definition of what you're looking for to even decide if you should really look at academic growth or if, just the child's best effort. One of the other arguments was not being able to accurately measure their best efforts. So that would be hard to kind of put that in there. As a society, we value effort in its own right. Those who strive harder contribute more to our collective well-being. So because of that quote, then it goes back and states, factoring effort appears to encourage risk taking, another characteristic we have. So that's a good thing that we want to be able to use effort for. So if we think about how it increases our characteristics and how it makes us want to take a risk to do things. So if you're like motivating students through effort, that would be good. Also, you can use creativity and energetic attempts to teach new things and to help students develop things in a better way. It also said that you can get some rewards for effort even when he doesn't do well. So that can be a reason of not doing it. So being like students getting rewarded because they gave an effort even though they didn't do the best thing, but then it also can be a reason to use effort because even though they tried their best, you still are trying to motivate them with the reward. So because they tried their best. Reasons to not include effort, students not understanding what it means to try hard. So some, depending on what your culture is, your background, they may not understand what they need to be doing or what hard work looks like, depending on where they come from. You have other countries who, when I was teaching, kids, their families wanted them to write very neat. It had to be correct. And then you have other families who they don't get that push. So the contribution in the class cannot be included. So if they're not contributing, then who's really controlling the contribution? Like, what if that child raised their hand and they're trying to contribute, but you missed it? What if that child is really just too shy and you missed that? And so now you're judging their effort is, their contribution is being, oh, they didn't put forth effort, but that's really not the case. And then it says that we should acknowledge that some kids are not, it doesn't mean that they're not involved if they don't speak out. And then it also stated that students can manipulate the appearance of effort. So we've all been in classes where students will look like they putting forth their best effort, but they just really doing it because they know, well, I'm gonna get a grade for this, I'm gonna get a grade for participation, so let me at least answer a question or look like I'm helping my neighbor. And so then it says that sometimes when we do effort, we don't necessarily go back as educators to find out why didn't that student succeed and what we need to do to help that student succeed. So we just kind of looking at the effort, but not really the why didn't they succeed in getting the task done or learning that particular task. And then trying hard is not always the best message, is the way I wrote it. They may feel like they can't always be successful. So if you're like, trying to say, okay, you didn't try hard and you just beat that into them, then they might feel like, hey, I am trying my best. This is the hardest I have. And now you've made them feel like they cannot be successful at anything. And then I can flip to compliance. It says, what if students fail to come to school? So we need to recognize that may not just be a compliance issue, that may be a parent issue, that may be something that they are going through at home and they can't help that they couldn't come. So we need to be careful when we're doing compliances in that matter. We also need to address behavior. One of the behaviors is cheating. So if they cheat, they need to just go on and get that 0, which will then show them that their final grade will be reduced. They might not see it at the beginning, but they'll see it at the end. Compliance with the rules does generally lead to greater student learning. So if you have great compliance with the students' rules, like they're following the rules, they are following what they're supposed to do, then you'll see better learning. Also says a well-managed class permits everyone to benefit the most. But reasons not to just solely depend on compliance in your classroom would be rules affect students' learning sometimes, depending on what they are, because some students won't volunteer, they won't get involved. When behaviors such as cheating and paying attention in class, those things can be debatable. Like you can debate those things from time to time. If did they cheat or did they just look over at somebody's paper? Like, like that's a debate. Um, punishing through lower grade does not always help. We must address the problem of attendance. So I think when students miss in school, like we need to address that problem versus saying, oh, you didn't comply, you didn't come to school, or you're not paying attention. Well, they probably can't pay attention because of whatever's going on in their home. So and then it talks about your report card is no place for your best guess at reporting a grade. So as an educator, we cannot report just guess on reporting their grade. What else was it? It was something else I wrote down. I wrote too much stuff down. I jump around a lot too. But for the most part, that was it. So reporting on other factors separately, we must be able to look at those things and figure out what we are going to put on the report card, and then make sure that it is a clear definition, is clearly defined, and then we got to teach the children on what they need to be doing in order to help them improve what they should be doing. So that's the most that I have.
Okay, so now we can get into the question portion. So I have question number 1. So question number 1 is, what ideas in this chapter are most convincing or useful? So one of the most convincing ideas in chapter 11 is the argument that grades must reflect achievement only, not a mixture of achievement and behavior. Sorry, y'all. I'm so sorry. Not a mixture of achievement and behavior. So the book makes a strong case that when teachers blend academic mastery with factors like effort, participation, responsibility, punctuality, the grades become distorted and loses its ability to communicate what a student truly knows and can do. So this idea is especially powerful because it highlights how easily grades can become misleading and how that miscommunication affects students' opportunities, confidence, and instructional needs. Equally compelling is the chapter's emphasis on clarity and fairness. The author stressed that a grade should function like a clear signal, meaning that anyone who sees a grade should be able to. Sorry, y'all. Equally compelling is the chapter's emphasis on clarity and fairness. The author stressed that a grade should function like a clear signal, meaning that anyone who sees a grade should be able to interpret it accurately. So a parent reading a report card should not have to guess whether a B represents a strong content mastery, missing homework, or inconsistent behavior. So this insistence on transparency strengthens trust between teachers, students, and their families, and brings more honesty to the grading process for all the parties involved. Another practical and persuasive idea is the recommendation to use recent and most representative evidence when determining grades. So this approach acknowledges that learning is a process and that early mistakes should not permanently penalize students if they eventually demonstrate mastery. So the idea is that the most current evidence is the most accurate evidence. And that encourages teachers to grade growth rather than average struggle, aligning and grading with the way real learning actually happens. And lastly, last thing I wrote down, so the chapter's argument for separating academic achievement from work habits is both useful and immediately actionable. So many schools are moving toward dual report systems, as I said earlier. And then the chapter also explains why that shift makes sense. It allows teachers to maintain the integrity of academic grades while still valuing behaviors like effort, collaboration, and responsibility. So the separation supports more targeted interventions and more meaningful conversations with the students. So all in all, the most convincing message is that grading is only fair and useful when it communicates learning clearly and accurately. So by focusing on achievement alone, using the best evidence, and creating transparent systems, teachers can ensure grades truly support learning rather than obscuring it. That's all I have for a question.
I have a question too. How does this chapter align with or challenge your own beliefs about teaching and learning? So as I was looking in my notes. It talks about in the book, it was kind of talking about motivation and feedback. And then sometimes instead of motivating our students when we do use some of this effort and compliance as grades, we use like the low grades as punishment. So I think for me, I would rather remove that and not really use it as a punishment rather than trying to get them to see that this is what they earned, not so much of this is your punishment. This is what you earned. This is why you earned it. So let me give you the feedback of what you can do to improve that skill or improve your grade so that you don't have to get this zero. Because you don't want the students to withdraw from learning or not or separate from education in general because of the misconception of if I don't do good in school or if I'm not trying my best, I'm just going to get punished with a bad grade. Also, I for me, I think being able to use clear rubrics, create separate and clear rubrics for academic mastery, and that way it gives the students responsibility and participation and collaboration. That way they have that effort and then they have the compliance of the things that you want them to do. You also, I also wrote down something similar to what Ryan said with the parents, you know, being able to report to the parents and the students. So you want to be able to have that academic report. That is something that I believe in, being able to give them the report the same way you give the students. Sometimes like the student will get a report from, can y'all still hear me? Okay, so sometimes the students will get a report from a teacher and not necessarily get the parent not necessarily get the same report about the student's academic growth. So you want to be able to make sure you're doing that, and then giving specific feedback on the why the grade is that way and how they can incorporate their standard grade along with their effort grade and along with their compliance grades in order to build their grade up overall. So that I think will help with, like, that's how I feel about teaching and learning. And then also focusing on mastery as well. So I think it has to be a good balance. And sometimes as educators, we don't necessarily have that balance of how to get in effort, compliance, and then mastery of what they're doing. So I think there should be a good balance of the two. But if I teach sixth grade, I feel like my other four colleagues that teach sixth grade should also be doing the same thing that I'm doing. So that it's not a miscommunication. It's all the way across the board.
I had question 4. Wait, did he have question 3? Or well, I had question 4. What part of this chapter makes you uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying it in practice? So one thing that did stand out in chapter 11 was when they talked about beliefs about the intended purpose of grades and what they can be used to accomplish, drive grading policies from the classroom to the boardroom. And in some grading practices, the underlying belief is that the purpose of grades is to rank and thus sort and select students, while in other grading policy practices in use today, are driven by the belief that grades should be used as motivators. And I did also note that teachers' overall goals should be to create fair and defensible grades. Students' data should be organized that you can easily convert it into a common scale, weigh it, and then desire it. And combine them to arrive at one overall number. So I guess one reason that this would be difficult for me is because with students having IEP goals and them having different goals and then being measured differently based on whatever level they are on, it is difficult as far as kind of articulating that to parents in a sense, and also just kind of noting their progress, because with me being a EC teacher, everything is like an intervention. So everything is already like a tier 3 intensive intervention. So they are already low. So being able to communicate that progress over perfection is relevant, and that's what the goal of the IEP is to make progress. Rather it, they may not be able to get to grade level or to where all of the other fifth grade students are, but they're still making adequate progress. And just being able to explain that and show that in a way, in elementary school we utilize fast bridge and graph. So being able to show the parent that even if she grew just a little bit, like if she grew by 3 points, she still grew. And we have to acknowledge that and celebrate that. Even though it may be small to the parent, it's big based on her IEP goal. So just being able to get that information to parents and to students as well, because a lot of times when students get, like I said, a word count per minute. Today I had a student who had 113 last week. Not even last week, October 17th, he scored 119, but then today he scored an 89. But he was also not paying attention in class. He also is a higher level. So he's like a level 4 when all of my other learners are like level 2, level 3. So sometimes he zones out and he feel like he don't need to, he don't need to. And today it kind of reflected like, this is why you got to, even if you know the content, sometimes you got to make sure you still are paying attention and participating so you can, because if your grade drop, now it's dropped. So your goal is to get it back up. So now we got to, so that did discourage him a little bit. So just being able to articulate that progress over perfection is still progress. And that the grades, even though they may not be the number that they want to see, it still has the potential to grow and increase and change. So yeah, that is my answer for that. And I'm sorry, I wanted to say one more thing, y'all. Grade reports also Inspire and Fast Bridge, as well as Number Worlds, all of the content, all of the curriculums that I use, grade reports should reflect the best measures of student achievement at that time they are completed. So utilizing that student today, I almost said his name, sorry. One of my student today who scored that 89 today, even though he failed, I'm still going to give him a chance. And today is Thursday. So I probably, after tomorrow's lesson, he probably will get a chance on Monday or either Tuesday to come back and try to get that word count score back up. But if more recent information about student achievement on a given learning target shows a higher level of learning, then the report card grade should be based on that newer evidence. So when I give that student that chance to perform, I'm hoping he get, come back up, and that would be the score that I would utilize. Even though I would note that he took it and he failed, but he practiced or maybe did something in class. We did something to give him some more of an intervention before he did his fluency drill again, and he did increase it. So that's how I would note that. And it should just be noted that we should make sure that we really take that steps serious, and even just making sure that we again grab that most relevant data, because grabbing the irrelevant data provides an incorrect picture of student achievement at that point in time, and that can also lead to ill-informed instructional and support decisions. It also reinforces the notion that it's better to already know than to learn, which is not true, and we don't want to give students that insight, and we don't want to have them in that mindset. So yep, that was my answer to question 4.
I know we skipped 3, but I don't mind answering it if you don't care. So it says, which strategy or idea from this chapter you would feel most confident implementing, and why? I'm kind of gonna say I would feel most comfortable implementing the motivation piece, but not necessarily in the way that the book is saying to do it. I think that it is good to motivate students with their learning and their grades and things of that nature. I think that you can do it in a more positive way. Um, I do take my kids' assessment scores and they go on the wall, and I challenge each, since I teach the same grade, the same um class, like math, everything's same grade. I challenge each class to improve on their assessment score. So that's kind of like a motivation, and then they get rewarded for whichever class grows the most. So I feel like that motivation piece was it was beautiful. Although you have to be careful, like it said at the bottom, to not get a miscommunication or perception of what it meant when you gave the student that particular grade for that motivation piece. You want to make sure that the parents understand that at report card grading time one, even though students have one grade, and another one has another, that you have communicated the problem and they understand exactly why they got this problem and what they need to do to improve it so that it's not mistaken. Um, yeah, so there you go.
All right. And we covered all of the questions. So to wrap this podcast up, I will go ahead and give the conclusion. So chapter 11 closes by emphasizing that grading is most powerful when it accurately summarizes student achievement at a specific point in time. So the book argues that grades should offer a clear and honest picture of what students know and can do in relation to well-defined learning targets. So to accomplish this, teachers must ensure that grades are based solely on the achievement evidence, not distorted by factors like effort, behavior, attendance, or compliance. The separation allows the grades to function as a true reflection of the academic performance, rather than a blend of unrelated elements. The chapter also highlights the importance of using the most current and the most representative evidence when determining report card grades. So rather than averaging all the scores together, an approach that can punish students for early misunderstandings, teachers should prioritize evidence that shows where students are standing now. So this shift supports a growth mindset and aligns grading with how learning actually unfolds through practice, feedback, and eventual improvement from the students. So, and another major point is the need for clear, transparent grading procedures that students understand in advance. So when teachers are communicating these expectations to their students in the criteria and the methods for determining their final grades, the students are more likely to stay motivated and take ownership of their progress. So transparency to the students reduces anxiety and builds trust, and ensures fairness across all of the learners that you have. And lastly, the chapter reinforces the effective grading and not just about producing a final number. So it is about the accurate communication. So report card grades become meaningful only when they are tied directly to the learning targets and supported by strong assessment practices. So when grades are aligned with achievement based on quality evidence, and separated from behavior, they become a powerful tool for grading instruction and supporting student growth and helping families understand their students' academic progress. So in conclusion, chapter 11 reminds us that grading is both a technical and ethical responsibility. Teachers must design grading systems that honor students' learning journeys, reflect true mastery, and maintain the integrity of the assessments for learning process. When grading is done well, it strengthens student motivation and improves instructional decision-making and ensures that every grade communicates a clear and accurate story of the student achievement. And that is all that we have for this week's podcast. So we will see you for the next podcast for chapter 12.